Good evening. This is John Young with the Disc Jockey News and Disc Jockey News TV. We are back. It's Tuesday. It's Tuesday night with Ben Stowe. Good evening, Ben.
Good evening, John.
It is another night to talk about cool things, and I want to jump right into it because I'm seeing something really, really cool behind you there. But before we do that, don't look. Don't look.
Pay attention to the cool things behind me.
There's nothing behind the curtain. That's what we want to see is right there. Stand up and show us what is the cool shirt what's the shirt of the week here.
This one came from my brother, so it's one of my favorites. And my son thinks it's the greatest shirt I own. Angry Birds Star Wars.
That would be pretty cool.
Can't get any geekier than that.
Yep. Oh yes, and I'm sure your son is at that age where that would be very, very awesome.
He's all about it.
Now, teenage daughter, she probably thinks you're not so cool with that, but I think there's a lot of other things that.
Yeah, I stopped being cool a few years ago, but that's
for another show when we get into the lamenting of when we were young and cool.
I will say this though, John. You, myself, and our viewers, we are in the industry of cool. And the cool thing behind me and the cool purpose for which it's used and the cool artists for which it's used with has restored me to cool with her. She does not think I'm cool. She thinks the people that I talk to on a daily basis are cool. Ergo, I'm cool by association. So,
Nice.
Yeah.
So
as long as I keep working for A-listers, she thinks I'm just all right.
You're right there. Yeah, you can afford to buy her lunch then, Dad. Go ahead. You're so cool enough for that. Well, let's talk about, first off, let's introduce your guest.
Well, my guest is a front of house console. There's a lot of great ones out there. This one I like because I like all the touch screens and I like the display of information that it gives me at a glance. I just like the way it's laid out. But this one in particular is the Soundcraft VI6. It's been around a few years. It's not the latest and greatest, but it's a very tried and true and trusty console.
Very nice. Now, when you say front of house console, for those who are not familiar with that, what is that? Kind of correlate that to a similar device in our DJ world.
Well, in the DJ world, typically we work with one mixing board. We work with the mixer that takes our various inputs, maybe connects to our controller software, Serato or Virtual DJ, and does some things for us. In the concert world, the front of house console is the mixing board that's used to mix the main sound that you hear in the audience. Typically, there's another console, which is a monitor console, and that's used to mix the monitors that the artists are hearing on the stage. But these days in the digital realm, the lines are getting blurrier between front of house and monitor console because the capability is so high. This console is capable of 96 channels to mix with 35 mix buses. So it's capable really of either role.
Now, when you say 35 mix buses, what does that mean?
Well, think about that as a mix, as it were.
Okay.
That, for example, here we're looking at auxes 9 through 16, aux mixes.
Okay.
And an aux mix might be used for a monitor. That might be something I would use to mix a monitor to the artist. It might be something I would use for an effects send. In this case, if you see here, this aux is marked sub. This aux here actually is controlling what's going to my subwoofers separately from going to my main stack. So an aux is an auxiliary mix.
Okay.
And that's just one of the different types of buses you can have. Of course, you can have your main, left, center, right outputs. But we can see also we have some group mixes, we have some matrix mixes, and there's just a bunch of cool stuff that, we can assign those buses to be, I guess.
And those buses, now is that like an XLR output that could go and feed your amplifiers or your speakers, or what? How is that?
It can be. That's where things get kind of exciting here is, on a console like this, the routing is virtual rather than physical.
Okay.
We have some local ins and outs on a rack underneath the desk. We have, another 64 inputs and 24 outputs, I think, in the stage rack that's, by the stage. There is no stage here today, but if it were.
Right.
But we can also route it through, for example, the internal effects processing in the unit. It could be routed, here we can see there's my effects. It could be routed through the MADI card, which is like AES-10. It's a digital I/O, through my stage box or to my local rack. And we're just now looking at this particular channel and where it could be routed to.
Now, comparing and contrasting, a typical DJ board that we're used to has usually a main out and maybe a booth out, and that's pretty much it, isn't it?
Yeah, probably. But what you could think about in terms of the routing is if your mixing board has selector knobs at the top of the channel, and you could say, well, this fader is assigned to CD1, this fader is assigned to Phono 1. That would be kind of a way of thinking about the routing, although here it's done, in the virtual realm, and it's just more, I guess, of the same. But yeah, your DJ board would have, main out, maybe booth out, and you could think about those as buses, I guess.
Something, yeah, it's very simple versions. Now you mentioned, of course, that this is all done with this particular board, all digitally.
Right.
Is there a sound quality difference then between the sound that's going to be running through that than that would be through, say, a typical analog board where I'm running my computer in with a RCA type jack?
Well, that's a dangerous question, John.
It depends.
Yeah, well, I mean, it does depend. It depends on the quality of the analog circuitry that we're talking about, and it depends on the quality of the AD-DA converters, which is analog to digital, digital to analog.
Okay.
Certainly not all digital consoles are created equally, and neither are all analog discs. Boy, there are some real purists out there, and I have an older Midas board that has all analog, mic preamps, and I think it just sounds beautiful. I think the question is, does it sound good enough? Mm-hmm. I mean, again, bear in mind, this board is used for some of the largest events in the world.
Yeah.
So if it didn't sound good enough, it wouldn't be used. But what you're asking is an audiophile question, and is there a sound difference? And I don't want to go there because
so it's really,
I guarantee you,
yeah,
9 out of 10 people will disagree with me, and they'll all disagree with each other too.
Yeah. Okay. Very cool.
You won't get 10 people to probably agree on that. Maybe you would.
Maybe you would. I'd probably not. Probably out of maybe 100.
Let's put it that way. It sounds good.
Oh. So kind of comparing and contrasting. So we're talking a little bit about, let's talk about audio, the ability to tweak the audio. Now, on my board, I've got a simple high, mid, low, and then I have some gain structure. Let's just talk about, in that equalization area, what kind of things will a board like that do beyond my DJ high, mid, low?
Well, there's a lot of things in terms of equalization, and that's one of the real powerful things about modern digital desks is that we call them dynamics, compression, gate, that sort of thing. All the different things that we used to have to have racks of outboard gear, they live on microchips inside this board. In the EQ realm, for example, we have each channel has a multiband parametric EQ.
Okay.
And we can select the width of the filter. Again, go back and reference our EQ episode. All that's built in here. We have a 4-band parametric that we can assign. We can have that parametric for every channel. We can have that parametric on our buses, and then we also have several graphics that we can use on the board as well. We can assign graphic EQs for the board's outputs itself.
So you can
now you can see this whole thing just turned to an EQ.
That's okay. And that capability to basically you can EQ what's coming in. Then
Yep.
you mentioned gate and what
Compression.
Okay, so now talk to what are those?
Well, let's break that down. Let's kind of take that nice and slow and let's get into it a little bit. Now, again, what I really like about this particular board is the amount of information it's giving me in real time. Here I see my channel, and the volume that it's producing, I guess.
Yep.
But there's also some LEDs that aren't lit down here that will tell me if I'm having any gain reduction, which would be like a limiter or a compressor.
Okay.
And we'll engage that here for a second and show you. But let's talk about what they are first.
Yeah.
So we go in here to our dynamics section, and we'll just unlight these up here. Here we can see my gate. And an easy way to think about a gate is to think about a gate on a fence. but it's a spring-loaded gate. And if you don't push on the gate hard enough, it doesn't open.
Okay.
So if there isn't enough sound, the gate stays shut. But if there's enough sound, the gate opens. If we turn my threshold way up on my gate, we can see that no sound is now coming through over here.
Okay.
But if I turn my threshold down, we can see my indicator for the gate there is red. The gate's saying, I'm shut. When we turn that down, all of a sudden these things start popping up because the gate is now allowing the signal through. So that could be really useful, for example, on something we don't want stage noise coming through a microphone until it's being sung into, or maybe a microphone for hi-hat or something, or something where we don't want a lot of noise coming through until we have the sound we want.
Right.
And we can also adjust the attack, the hold, and the release. How quickly does the gate react?
Okay.
Both opening and then shutting again, behind that signal. So
a gate really is then designed to eliminate the lower volume sound. Is that what I'm getting right? So once it hits a minimum, then it's not. Yeah. Does it contour that sound after it hits that minimum and opens?
Well, I'm gonna use the simple answer: no, not really. Let's just say that all it does is opens and lets the sound through.
Okay, so that makes sense.
It does have some effect on the sound, but let's just say no. It just lets the sound through. Where then we would use things like EQ and whatnot to contour it. Although things like a compressor will contour it too.
Okay.
In a different way. So down here we have our compressor, and now the compressor is working basically the opposite of a gate. Compressor says when you reach a certain threshold, I'm going to start to push you down.
Okay.
In fact, if we see this green graphic here, the little green triangle at the top, that's showing me how aggressively my compressor is going to react. For example, a compressor with a ratio of like 10 to 1 is basically a limiter. When it gets to that point, it just stops.
Okay.
It doesn't get any louder. But a ratio of like 2 to 1 is a little more gentle. And so when it gets to that point, the compressor just starts turning it down to a ratio. You still can continue to get louder, but it will start to reduce the dynamic range of that signal and start to compress it. And we'll see that gain reduction occur down here. Let me just clamp my compressor way down. And I see those LEDs happening down here now.
Yep.
Basically, the signal is getting to a point where the compressor is reacting. And the song just ended.
I was going to say, all of a sudden I lost the light. So.
Oh, darn it.
So now, Ben, when a compressor kicks in, now, is it compressing all frequencies, or is it focusing on certain frequencies?
Again, for the simplest terms, let's just say all. It's just compressing, that signal. There are things like you can key your compressor and things like that to compress a signal from one instrument based on another to make room in the mix, basically. Because loudness is perceived. I think this train is going to get way ahead of us on the tracks here if we start going down that road.
Yeah, no,
though.
but just the idea is most of the time a compressor is doing all frequencies across the board. And
what you'll hear, though, is certainly some instruments or some parts of a song are louder than others, and it will start to compress those back to the level of the others. Again, you're losing some of that dynamic range, so it will not be as defined or as crisp, I think, are words I would use. Another front of house engineer might say, well, this guy's a moron, and he's probably right. But, but I'm trying to think of ways to draw this with crayons, so to speak, And here you can see those, that massive gain reduction occurring. I've got a ratio of 3.5. If I turn that ratio down, it's basically now limiting, and if I loosen that ratio back up, we'll see a bit more activity on the LEDs, a bit more bounce happening as we're not basically squishing the full signal. Here too we have an attack and a release. How quickly does it react? We maybe don't want the compressor to react too fast. We maybe want that initial spike, maybe something like the kick drum. Say, well, let's let the first little bit through and then take the edge off of that. But that's more of a chef and his spice, in the soup, so to speak.
So if a compressor is set wrong, how do you know that in sound, and what kind of problems could that be? Could that give you?
Your sound quality is definitely going to be affected. It's not going to sound defined or crisp or. I think it's crazy. The only word that comes to mind is it's going to sound heavily compressed. I realize that's a pretty useless answer,
yeah.
But if I had some royalty-free music, I would turn it up and compress the heck out of it. Or we can do it if you want to give it a roll.
Yeah, we'll probably Mr. YouTube will probably slap us.
All right, so here's a homework assignment. Everybody go take a track that feed it into. Normally you wouldn't. We wouldn't do this on an iPod track either. This is just for illustrative purposes. But there's your homework assignment. Go take a track, feed it into a compressor and play with your ratio and your attack and your threshold. And just now there's also makeup gain for what we compress and kind of bring some life back into it. This board also has a limiter.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Let's go to limiter now. We've talked about the compressing.
Well, the limiter, like I said, is basically a compressor with like a 10-to-1 or greater ratio, where once you get to that threshold, it just stops. In fact, if we look, we see our little triangle disappear until we bring the compressor above where the gate is.
Sure.
Above where we bring the limiter above where the compressor is.
Yeah, there we go. I knew what you're saying, just didn't say it. Yeah.
Yeah. So you can see there where I'm reshaping my triangle basically. And that's showing me where that signal has room to compress before it limits.
Mm-hmm.
We talked about this, I think, in a loudspeaker episode. But one of the real dangers of compression is that we start to put that amount of energy, even though our overall loudness doesn't increase, the energy we're giving to our loudspeaker increases. We lose the crest factor in our music. So it gives our voice coil more energy to try to deal with, and we can heat that thing up a little faster. All things in moderation, right?
Yeah. Yep. Now with the limiting now, if you have, the compressing will somewhat act as a limiter if you turn it up high enough. With the limiting now, are you going to, if it's set wrong, what kind of, would you be able to notice that any different than you would a compressor?
Yeah, I think so. Again, I think it's it's going to affect the quality of the sound.
Just the quality is what you're going to notice.
Yeah, that's the biggest thing, I think. Let's take a look at some of the.
Well, actually, we got one more here, Ben.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah. Now, if I'm running and I'm over pushing into, say, a separate compressor or limiter, or maybe either one. But if we're having a signal that's being clipped from the board, say if I'm overdriving the board at some point in time, what will a compressor or limiter be able to do with that signal that's being overdriven, or will it? Is there anything that it can do with that overdriven signal, or is it just basically bad sound in, bad sound out?
We really have to think about the signal chain as a whole. If the signal is already overdriven and it's distorting, there's no way to take that distortion back out. If at any time you overdrive a signal, you have distortion on some level. There are many stages of gain coming into this board, meaning that I can take a microphone and I can adjust how loud that signal is coming into my board a number of ways. One is I have a preamplifier, input mic preamp. Ironically, this is kind of where I was going to go. So, okay. Or I just went there anyway.
Exactly. Really, it has nothing to do with that I asked the question.
Yeah, it has nothing to do with
the question. I'll have to come back again and ask again.
You always do such a good job, John. You keep me on track, and I appreciate it. So here, I have an amplifier just like we do for our speaker, but it's a preamplifier. It takes this tiny little microphone signal and it amplifies it to a usable level.
Okay.
Now, if that mic is really already coming in hot, there's a pad that I can use, and we'll see if I engage that pad how my signal just drops. In this case, I don't need the pad engaged, but the input gain and the pad are two places that I can adjust. How much signal is coming into the board, and then I have the ability to trim that as well, and those various stages of gain, and then again throughout the dynamics. But if it's coming in distorted, I can make it quieter, but still distorted.
So there's just really nothing you can do except set the signal coming in properly, or you have it going.
Well, that's exactly it. What you don't want is a signal that's coming in too low, and we have to crank the gain because we're going to bring up the noise floor, which is just sort of the noise that lives in everything. You're going to hear that hiss and whatnot as you bring up that noise floor. You want a good, strong signal to noise ratio, we call that, and you don't want one too hot.
Yeah.
It's just right. Right in the middle, right? It was a nursery rhyme, something like that.
Yeah, something like that, maybe.
Hot or cold, I ain't eating this. I don't know, something like that.
Something like that. I think there's a bear, or a little blonde-haired girl running around throwing things at bears and sleeping in their bed. Or I don't know.
Now, since we're on the screen, something else we can do is we have a low cut. And for example, I might say, I've got a female vocalist. I don't need anything below 100 hertz, maybe even 115 or 120 hertz. I don't need it at all. I'm just going to get rid of it. That might be some handling noise on the microphone, those sorts of things. But bottom line, I don't need it. So I can just engage that low cut and take that out right away and just be done with that. Same with the male vocal. I'd do that as well. Just if that's a frequency we're just not going to need. This board also has a high cut. So, if there was, something that I just really didn't need those higher frequencies, bass guitar or something, maybe I'd take those out. We do want some higher frequencies on things like kick drum, though, and this is just kind of a fun little place to throw this in.
Mm-hmm.
We think about a kick drum as being that low, deep.
Yeah.
But there's other elements of the kick drum. There's the smack, we'll call it. I'm sure somebody else came up with that word, and I just stole it over 20 years I've been doing this. I picked it up somewhere. So whoever invented that word, I'm sorry. But when the pedal hits the drum head, and that's a part of the characteristic of that sound. It's a part of what we want to hear. The boom, the smack, and the click. All part of that. So we actually don't want to lose some of those high frequencies in the kick drum because they're a part of what we want to hear.
You never thought about that. Thought about it from that perspective. That's kind of cool.
Oh, well, little things, that go into the mix.
See, we learn something every Tuesday night.
Indeed. Some of the other cool features of this board, most of your live sound boards have what's called phantom power, which is sending voltage through the microphone line. So if you have something like an active direct box that requires power, or a condenser microphone that requires power, I can turn the phantom power on this board, and then we'll see that 48 volt light comes on.
And phantom power is pretty much consistent at 48 volts.
No, it's kind of there's a couple different flavors of phantom power. That's 48 volt is what I see most of the time. But if you look at microphones, sometimes they'll call out a few different things, and but they'll consistently we just say they'll consistently work with 48 volt.
Now, what will happen if I'm using a microphone that isn't needing phantom power and say the switch was on? Is there potential for damage?
Shouldn't be.
Okay.
I suppose anything is possible, but there shouldn't be.
Okay.
There are devices, like mic splitters and things like that will actually strip phantom power off if you're sending it to multiple places, and there's some utility things like that. But by and large, you should be just fine using any mic with phantom power. I don't want to say that universally because God only knows what's out there.
Yeah.
But it isn't like the thing's going to burst into flames in your hand. So
good to know.
Here again, we can say, well, this channel here, where is it getting its signal from? We can choose the routing on this. We kind of covered that a little bit. And then what's nice is, a keyboard. We can come in and we can name this channel. So this one was named Kyle after our technician here, senior technician here. Senior technician who's younger than me, but whatever.
Yeah.
He's a pretty sharp kid and young man. He's a pretty sharp young man.
There you go.
So we named it after him. Some of the other things though that are neat are we talked about some of the buses. We also have things called VCAs, and now we're just kind of running away. The train's leaving the station. I'm sorry. So
VCA. First off, tell me what does VCA mean?
Well, it's a variable control amplifier.
Okay.
And there's DCAs too on some digital boards, but anyway, think about it this way. Think about it as a way to control lots of channels from one channel. And here's an example. Let's say you've got your drum kit. So let's say we've got a couple of rack toms, we've got a snare, kick, a couple of overheads, we got hi-hat, we got snare top, snare bottom. So you got a lot of things happening with the drum kit.
Yeah.
You don't probably need to go in and adjust those much throughout the night. You just want to be able to bring up drums as a whole. So we could come in and we could say, okay, this VCA here is our drum kit, for example. We could set up this VCA and we could, then take and assign these channels to that VCA.
Mm-hmm.
And what you would see here then is, if we can get an audio track playing again, what we'll see here is this channel here has now been assigned to VCA 1.
Okay.
So I can control its level here, but also I can control the VCA level here. And that's going to control this channel. I guess there's no way to bring it up without actually playing the song. So, but anyway, this would now control this channel and all of these channels as well.
Gotcha.
So I could say this is my drum VCA, and that's just going to control everything in that.
So yeah, if you need to take him down as a whole, there you go.
Another cool feature of modern digital desks is that I can take a piece of information and for some reason, let's say I had 10 microphones that I all wanted to set up the same. I could do that,
So basically, you're copying profiles, is what you're saying.
Yeah, let's say that I want to, take and paste this into all of these channels.
And that information you're pasting, that could be the equalization information. Could it be individual limiters on each channel and everything like that?
It depends on the board. This board has the ability to paste effects, to paste routing, to paste, virtually any attribute you want to paste.
Wow.
Selectively. But then there's also things like scenes and, mix cues and you can set the board up for entire shows and recall it for one group or another. And, that really depends on the board. And most of the production level boards have a staggering level of capability. I was just commenting the other day to a guy. We were working with a band that was huge in the 70s and 80s, household name. And, these guys obviously, they've lived their lives. They've lived through this evolution. But what if you could just go back to the arena rock era and put one of these consoles in the hands of a front of house engineer and say, look at that. I mean, mind-numbing. It'd be like aliens landing, I think,
Oh, yeah.
Anyway, so
let's we're getting close to the end of our show here, Ben. One last thing, and a lot of typical DJ controller is going to range in price from you can probably get something entry for $300 to maybe $1,500. We get you a pretty nice DJ controller. A big boy like that that's sitting behind you. How do we, and can you slide over to your left a little bit because we haven't seen the whole thing. There's 5 screens on that, isn't there?
This one has 5, yeah.
Okay, so that's pretty much there. Can see most of it on the screen.
Well, and there's a couple of racks you can't see too. Again, those stage racks, and there's effects processing, external units, and I don't know. I'd have to actually figure out exactly everything that's here and what it's configured, but probably ballpark of like 75,000, somewhere in that neighborhood. So somewhere in that I think the most expensive board that I ever did anything with was a Midas XL8 when they were still part of the Electro Voice group. Okay. So the Midas headquarters was just down the road, and they had an XL8 there, and I think it was going for like $360,000 at the time.
Oh my!
Now again, anything that's new, these prices have really come down. There's digital boards you can now pick up for a couple grand.
Oh,
they're not the same.
It's certainly not. Yeah,
But do you need to spend $70,000 to $100,000, or even $50,000, or even $20,000? Probably not.
Yeah.
It depends on what you're doing.
Yeah, exactly.
If you're out on the road 5 days a week and you're making, you're selling out arenas for millions of dollars a show, and there's a lot on the line.
Yep.
Oh, that's a different, So.
Different story. Yeah. Very neat, Ben. Very neat. Good stuff. Good stuff.
Nothing wrong with the $300 DJ controller.
Oh, exactly.
Nothing wrong with that at all.
A lot of people make a lot of money with those. But neat stuff. It's just kind of cool to look at the other side of controllers and audio gear.
think the return on investment is a lot faster on a DJ controller.
I think you can pay for it.
Truth to that though, obviously this show is Disc Jockey News, and obviously I work with tens of thousands of DJs across the country, and I have so many friends that are DJs. I was a DJ for a good time in my life. It's a different world, but you have to have that. You have to balance that return on the investment.
Yeah, that's for sure. With anything a person does, that's important.
You can generally make a faster return on DJ gear, but it also has a shorter lifespan. These things are being bought with a 5-6 year lifespan in mind, or longer. And those are some really hard years, by the way. There's hundreds of shows.
Yeah, touring is a little bit different than what we do. That's for sure. Well, great stuff, Ben. Great stuff. If you guys have got any questions for Ben, you can go out to Twitter and can do @NLFXBen, or you can do the hashtag NLFXBen, or you can go out to Facebook and do a search for Ben Stowe out there. There's some different groups where Ben is frequents quite a bit. You can go ask questions, share information, tell a story, share a picture, or most importantly, share a cool T-shirt. If you've got a T-shirt, connect with Ben. He'll get you, send it to him, and we'll have him wear it on one of the upcoming shows. Great stuff. Ben, one more time, thank you very much for your time tonight.
My pleasure, John.
This is John Young with the Disc Jockey News and Disc Jockey News TV. Good night.